The town of Redford was unremarkable. A quiet place where people lived predictable lives. School, work, football games, and weekend bonfires. But beneath its ordinary facade, there was something else. Something lurking in whispers passed down. Through generations, it centered around one place, the old bridge. The bridge had stood for centuries, its weathered stones scarred by time. By day, it was nothing more than a path leading to the abandoned mill road. By night, it was something else entirely. The legend was just a game to the teenagers of Redford until the night of the dare. Tyler, Matt, Sophie, and Ava stood on the riverbank as the last light of day faded. Laughter masked their unease, but the weight of the stories pressed against them like an unseen force. "Bet you won't go down to the lake tonight," Tyler taunted. Matt smirked. "Why don't you? You're always talking about ghosts." Sophie's voice cut through the tension. "Let's do it." They made their way to the bridge, the air thick with humidity. Crickets hummed, the wind whispering through the trees, but beneath it all, something felt off. Matt was the first to see it, a flicker of white beneath the water's surface. At first, just a shimmer, like moonlight on the rippling lake. But then, it moved. A woman. Her face pale, her expression blank. Long blackened hair fanned around her like ink dissolving in water, and she was looking directly at them. "Guys, look," Matt whispered. They all turned, their breath catching as they saw her. The woman's lips parted as if speaking, but no sound came. Then, she was gone. The water stilled as if she had never been there. Ava shivered. "Okay. That was freaky. Let's go." As they turned to leave, the wind howled, and the bridge groaned as if alive. The air grew icy. And then, she was there. Not in the water, but standing on the bridge. Her face was clearer now, pale, sunken, with hollow eyes that pulled in all light. Her mouth moved, forming words that never came. The ground trembled beneath them. "Run!" Matt screamed. They ran. Through the trees, past the riverbank, not stopping until they reached town. The feeling of being watched never left them. The next morning, they realized the truth. The stories weren't just legends. They were warnings, one by one. The signs appeared. Sophie glimpsed shadows moving in mirrors. Tyler felt cold fingers brush his neck at night. Matt's reflection no longer followed his movements. Ava heard her name whispered from the empty darkness. And the lake. It was never still anymore. Something beneath it had awakened, and it was waiting. Some stories are meant to be told. Others are meant to be warnings. The bridge in Redford still stands. The lake beneath it still waits. And those who disturb its silence never truly escape. The clockmaker's curse. The shop had been there as long as anyone could remember. A small, dusty place tucked away on the corner of Elm and Fifth. The sign above the door simply read, "R. Thorne Clockmaker," in faded gold letters. No one really knew much about the man who ran it. He didn't speak much, kept to himself. Some said he was a genius, others whispered that he was mad. But what people agreed on was this. The clocks in his shop were like nothing else. Exquisite, old-fashioned, and every one of them seemed to hum with a strange energy. There were grandfathers and cuckoos, pocket watches and wall clocks, all ticking in a harmonious dissonance. Time seemed to bend around them, as though the clocks themselves were aware of the passing moments. Ethan Adams first noticed the shop when he passed by one rainy evening. He wasn't the type to pay much attention to oddities. In fact, He had always been a man of logic, of schedules and plans. But something about that little shop called to him. It was almost as if it was waiting for him. He pushed open the creaky door, the bell above it jangling softly. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wood and brass. The clocks ticked in unison, creating a constant rhythmic sound that was oddly soothing. The clockmaker, an old man with wiry glasses perched on the end of his nose, looked up from behind a cluttered counter. His eyes were sharp, like he'd been waiting for Ethan. "You've come for something, haven't you?" the man said, his voice low but certain. Ethan was taken aback, but nodded slowly. I don't know. Just browsing, I guess." The clockmaker's eyes twinkled. "You're not browsing. You're searching for something. Something that only time can give you." Ethan wasn't sure why, but those words sent a chill down his spine. It felt like the old man could see right through him, as if he knew more about Ethan than Ethan knew about himself. Then the clockmaker stood up slowly, his joints creaking. He reached into a drawer behind the counter and pulled out an ornate pocket watch. The gold was tarnished, the face cracked, but there was something mesmerizing about it. "This, the clockmaker said, handing it to Ethan, "is no ordinary timepiece. It has the power to bend time. You can go back, change things, fix your mistakes. But you should be careful. Time has its own rules, and it will always demand a price." Ethan's first instinct was to laugh, dismissing the man as a kook. But then something about the way the watch felt in his hand, the weight, the coolness of the metal, made him pause. Maybe he was just desperate. Maybe he was tired of his life, tired of the mistakes he'd made. "How much?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the strange feeling in his chest. The clockmaker didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at Ethan for a long moment, as if weighing him. $100, the old man said. "But remember, the price you pay for time is never just money." Ethan handed over the cash, not thinking twice. The clockmaker smiled, a thin, almost sad smile, and handed him the watch. The first time Ethan used the watch was that night when he was drunk and angry after a fight with his girlfriend Sarah. He had left things unsaid, hurtful things, things he couldn't take back. He held the watch and twisted the crown, just as the clockmaker had told him to. The second the hands of the watch moved, time seemed to ripple, the world around him fading into a blur. When he woke up the next morning, it was as if nothing had happened. Sarah was sitting on the couch, reading a book, the fight from the night before forgotten. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. He had done it. He had fixed it. But then the first, death, came. It was his neighbor, Mr. Timmons, an elderly man who had always been friendly to him. One night, just a few days after he used the watch, Mr. Timmons was found dead in his garden, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. There was no sign of struggle, no explanation for how it happened. The police called it an accident, but Ethan knew better. The watch had changed something. It had altered time, but it had also taken something in return. As the days went on, the deaths continued. First, a colleague at work, then a childhood friend. Each time, someone close to Ethan died, in a bizarre, inexplicable way. Each time, the watch seemed to be calling to him, urging him to use it again, to fix things, to go back. But it wasn't just the deaths. Ethan began to notice that people around him were changing too. Their faces became more distant, their voices hollow. His memories began to blur like he was living in a half-forgotten dream. And when he tried to remember the details of his past, things didn't add up. People he once knew seemed like strangers. Old conversations were hazy, twisted. It was as if the watch wasn't just changing time. It was erasing it. Desperate to stop the cycle, Ethan returned to the shop, but it was gone. The little corner on I'm not here to entertain you. I don't want any more messages. No more theories. No more speculations. I just need to get this out, and then I'm done. Back in 2017, I was a YouTuber. Not a huge one, but big enough. If you were into overnight challenges, urban exploration, or sneaking into abandoned places, you probably came across my videos. It was all fake. That's what I need you to believe. Because the alternative is worse. I was always careful. Planned. Every video like a heist. Research, entry points, escape routes. But in May of 2017, I got cocky. I wanted something big, something viral. That's how I found Cove Plaza Shopping Mall. It had been shut down since 2013, mostly intact. No official security, just a couple of dead cameras. Easy in, easy out. I slipped in through a service door, flashlight in one hand, camera in the other. The inside was exactly what I wanted. Silent, untouched, decaying in all the right ways. The tile floors were caked in dust, skylights shattered, the air stale with the smell of mold and old grease. I started filming immediately, playing up the creep factor. Then I saw them, hundreds of them, mannequins. Stores that had been picked clean still had them. Standing there, waiting, watching. Some were headless, others were missing limbs. A few were arranged in groups like they were in mid-conversation. I made some dumb joke for the camera. Something about how this was the real mannequin challenge. I even moved a few, positioning them in weirder poses. I shouldn't have touched them. By 2 a.m., I had set up camp in the food court. I was filming a menu sign, still eerily lit after all these years when I heard it. Footsteps, not mine. I killed my light. Silence. Then, a faint plastic scrape. I turned my camera toward the sound, slowly raising the brightness. The mannequins had moved. Not by much, just a few inches, but I knew where they'd been before. I checked the footage. One near the escalator had its arms at its sides a few hours ago. Now one hand was reaching forward. I laughed, but it wasn't real. Just nerves. I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe I bumped it earlier. Maybe my memory was bad. I went back to filming. At 3:15 a.m., my camera shut off. The battery was fully charged. It shouldn't have died. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and nearly dropped it. The mannequins were closer. The one by the escalator was on the first step. I don't remember getting up. I don't remember running. 1 second I was sitting, the next I was at the other end of the food court, panting like I'd sprinted a mile. I wasn't alone anymore. A head turned in my peripheral vision. Plastic slammed against the ground. I bolted. Didn't look back. Didn't stop filming. Not until I was outside, gasping for breath. My camera was still dead, but my phone had the footage. I never uploaded it. The next day, I checked the files. All corrupted, except for one. A single still frame. It was a blurry shot of me, sitting on the floor of the food court. And behind me, a mannequin. No head, no arms, just standing there. I never went back. I stopped making videos. My channel died. Maybe that was for the best. I don't care if you... Believe me, just don't go looking for Cove Plaza. They don't like being watched.